Okay, ladies and gentlemen, time to end this. And once again, I apologize for taking so long with this.
It's been more than a month, John. I didn't know that this was the month plus 1 week of Pokemon.
Will you shut up? You see, this is why doing a month of RPGs is a bad idea.
Johnny, the only RPG you actually did this month was Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow, and the rest of them were, short N64 spin-off games plus the trading card game, which I still have better cards than you, so you really have no excuse.
Well, I'm trying to start this review up, but you assholes just have to keep rubbing it in, do you?
Yeah.
Of course.
Fuck you both. Let's end this month already. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Pokemon Gold and Silver.
And Crystal.
Oh, for fuck's sake. By the early to mid-2000s, people were gearing up for the next installment of the Pokemon series, especially with the release of Pokemon the First Movie, which introduced us to some of the new Pokemon that were going to be available in the next generation. In October of 2000, Americans saw the release of Pokemon Gold and Pokemon Silver, although it should be noted that Japanese gamers have already had this game for almost a year before we got it.
I understand that the game was made in Japan for Japanese audiences, but Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow were a massive success worldwide. There really wasn't any excuse for waiting that long to release it everywhere else.
I really hate this from companies. I can understand if it's the first game of a franchise and you're just not sure how well it's going to do, but when you have a full-blown success like Pokemon or, any other type of RPG like Final Fantasy, you really need to work on translation and localization pretty much from the get-go of the game. You know you're going to release it in other areas, so just really need to work on it. I mean, just look at Fire Emblem 3DS.
Or Ace Attorney Investigations 2, which still hasn't come out yet.
Hell, the original Final Fantasy III took 16 years for it to get overseas, but we digress. When this game came out, I was excited. Not only was I still in the middle of my Pokemon high, I was finally able to get the full Pokemon experience because at this point, my brother Mark was also into the series, so I had someone to battle and trade Pokemon with. It was a good time to be a Pokemon fan. Now, Generation 2, in terms of gameplay, behaved just like Red, Blue, and Yellow, so we don't have to spend too much time on battle mechanics and overall setup. But that's not to say that Generation 2 didn't introduce anything new. No, quite a number of things were introduced. For starters, color! Look at all this. The trees are colored like trees, all the towns are full of vibrant colors and such, and Pokemon are now colored appropriately as well. All the Pokemon are also sporting new artwork, and hell, in Crystal they're full out animated. The sprites are also a bit different depending on what version you're playing. It's not much, but I think it works well enough to make the games feel separate. The battle interface has been changed as well, and by that we mean an experience bar, which lets you know how much experience you need left in order to level up. This is one thing I'm glad they added, though at times it can be visually frustrating. I'm sure a lot of you know what I'm talking about. You're on the verge of leveling up, you defeat the Pokemon, you get the experience, the blue meter goes up, just for it to stop right before it reaches its peak, as if to say, fuck you, one more battle. Then later down the game when you want it to move by a lot, it barely moves at all because of higher experience requirements. Come on baby, there you go. Oh, you fucker!
Another new thing. Pokemon have their own genders now. That's something, right? Well, unless if you're going to take advantage of breeding, it really doesn't impact a lot though. But how is gender determined, you may ask? Well, for Generation 2 anyway, a Pokemon's gender is determined by their attack stat. If it's above average, the Pokemon will be male, and if it's below average, the Pokemon will be female. Ah, sexism.
A day and night cycle gets introduced in this game as well. Basically, certain events for Pokemon only appear at a certain time of day. For example, Hoot Hoot, the owl Pokemon, is really only out at night.
Does the player become a Warhog?
No, John, he does not become a Werehog.
Okay, good.
Meanwhile, Pokemon like bug types are more frequent during the day or so. The day and night system really doesn't affect the main plot or anything, but it is needed if you want specific Pokemon or to do certain events in the game.
Pokemon can also now hold on to items to use in battle, or to give them a boost in stats. For instance, if you let a Pokemon hold on to a berry or such, they'll use it under the correct circumstances. There's also some times where you can obtain phone numbers of certain trainers after defeating them. With their phone numbers in hand, you can receive calls and set up a rematch or receive items, but most of the time the trainers will just spout out some pointless banter that ends up being more annoying than valuable. Finally, as far as I'm aware, there are also new types of Pokemon, Dark and Steel. You remember how I said back in the Generation 1 review that Psychic Pokemon were pretty much the game breakers of the entire game? Well, these two types were introduced just for the sake of countering how utterly broken Psychics were. Don't get me wrong, it's still quite easy to win battles with Psychic Pokemon, but baby steps, I guess.
The most important change to the battle mechanics in Gen 2 was the split of the special stat from Red, Blue, and Yellow. In a Pokemon battle, moves draw their strength from either the attack stat or the special stat, depending on the type of move that you used. Types like Rock, Bug, and Flying are physical based, and types like Fire, Ice, and Psychic are special based. In Gen 1, although there were different stats for physical attack and physical defense, there was only one stat for special moves. This led to Pokemon with high special stats, like most Psychic Pokemon, being incredibly fucking broken. Gen 2 split the special stat into two different stats, special attack and special defense. As a result, a lot of Gen 1 Pokemon got nerfed or buffed when brought over to Gen 2. For example, Hypno took a big hit to his special attack in the transition from Gen 1 to Gen 2, but Snorlax got a massive boost to his special defense instead. And other Pokemon like Rapidash didn't get affected at all.
Hey, this is important shit here, man.
Yeah, fascinating. I think what Ted's trying to say here is that the game mechanics are a bit more balanced. See, that's all you had to say.
But what about Eevee and Ivy training?
Nobody cares, Ted! So yeah, like we established, Generation 2 introduced quite a number of things, but let's get on with the journey itself. The story takes place 3 years after the events of Generation 1. Like the first game, you're free to give this character a name, but officially this boy is known as Ethan.
That's stupid.
That's stupid. His name should be Gold.
What the hell's wrong with Ethan?
He's called Gold in the manga.
I mean, hell, Blue was called Green in the manga, so his name should really be Green, not Blue.
Nerds, the both of you! Anyway, Ethan lives in the region of Johto, and he's quite a wealthy kid, I might add. I mean, his fridge is stocked up with $350 lemonade and everything. Like Red in Generation 1, he's also quite the mute and has a mom that lives in the kitchen. In Pokemon Crystal, you can choose between a boy or a girl, but besides the difference in gender, they play exactly the same and experience the exact same plot. Professor Elm, who specializes in Pokemon research, assigns Ethan with the task of retrieving an item from Mr. Pokemon, who lives in the outskirts of Cherry Grove City. Professor Elm allows Ethan to choose one of 3 Pokemon to accompany him on the journey.
Cyndaquil.
Upon leaving the building, Ethan encounters a red-headed creep who immediately shoves Ethan back upon talking to him. What an ass. Anyway, as soon as Ethan meets up with Mr. Pokemon, he's greeted by none other than Professor Oak himself, who gives Ethan a Pokedex to collect data on Pokemon.
Didn't we already do that with Red?
Well, you see, Johnny, there are 100 new species of Pokemon that we didn't know about before.
And just where were they hiding all this time?
Slightly to the left of some very steep mountains.
Really?
Yep.
Huh. Anyway, it turns out that Mr. Pokemon has a Pokemon egg to deliver to Professor Elm. But before we can deliver it, we run into that red-headed ass who shoved us earlier. Turns out he stole one of the Pokemon that Professor Elm kept in his lab and now wants to become a Pokemon Master. After battling him, you can give your newfound rival a name when filing the police report.
So what name are you gonna give this ass?
Oh, classy.
As soon as the Pokemon egg is delivered to Professor Elm, he suggests that Ethan take the Pokemon League challenge and attempt to become a Pokemon Master. And this is where the overall structure and progression of the plot becomes very similar to Generation 1. As Ethan, it's up to you to travel all over Johto and attain gym badges from 8 different gym leaders, each sporting their own Pokemon types and challenges. Johto as a whole feels a bit more streamlined than Kanto from Generation 1. There's rarely a moment where you'll need to go extremely out of your way to progress with the journey, with 1 or 2 exceptions mind you, but traveling through Johto feels less of a chore than Kanto did.
It also helps that HMs are better implemented this time around. While they're still annoying, HMs like Cut and Waterfall only need to be used a very limited number of times, and even then, HMs like Strength and Surf are still really good moves to teach your Pokemon for the sake of winning battles easily.
I think the towns do a better job diversifying themselves from each other. The early game towns such as New Bark Town or Cherry Grove are pretty bland, but the rest each have their own unique flavor and difference that's easily to tell which one is which. They each have their own little personality this way, I think.
Speaking of towns, let's get into the locations themselves. Now, New Bark Town and Cherry Grove City are really just there to get you used to how the overworld works out. Hell, there's even an old man who will give you a rundown of what certain buildings do and give you a town map for spending some time with him. The journey really begins in Violet City, home of Faulkner, who specializes in bird Pokemon, and the Sprout Tower, where you'll spend more time than necessary looking at Bellsprouts because that's all the trainers use here, the occasional Hoot. I should also note that throughout your journey, you will encounter your rival at probably the most inopportune times. Seriously, if there's one thing this asshole is good at, it's popping up when you don't want to see him. Make sure your Pokemon are at full health at all times.
Personally, I really hate how he keeps talking about being the strongest, and how he'll have the strongest Pokemon, but he never changes his lineup, and he always loses. What an idiot.
Silver is actually my favorite rival character in the series, not only because he looks legitimately badass and has an awesome battle theme, but also because until N from Pokemon Black and White, he was pretty much the only antagonist in the series to have some actual character development. He starts off a complete prick in the beginning of the game, but as you continue your journey, he learns that being an asshole isn't the way to solve your problems, and he gradually becomes more caring towards his Pokemon over time. They even integrate this story point with the gameplay mechanics, as his Golbat, which will only evolve into a Crobat if it reaches max happiness, will only evolve if you trigger the optional events with him in the second half of the game.
Next up, we have Azalea Town, where we find out that Team Rocket from Generation 1 is back and ready to make a big return. Personally, I can't believe it took them 3 years to realize that being defeated by an 11-year-old really wouldn't mean a goddamn thing in the greater scheme of things, but okay, whatever, they're back, and you, the 11-year-old, have to stop them again. The gym leader here is Bugsy, who has bug-type Pokemon at his disposal.
I think you mean at her disposal.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's meant to actually be a guy.
I don't know. I mean, fuck it. Bugsy has bug-type Pokemon at its disposal. Azalea Town also houses Kurt, who can make specialized Pokeballs for you if you give him the correct apricorn. I never really use the services all that often, though. Before heading into the next city, we can come across the daycare center where a new mechanic is introduced, breeding. You see, if you give the daycare staff 2 Pokemon of the opposite gender, there's a possibility that they'll spend a lovely Saturday night together and produce an egg. Eggs can hatch into baby Pokemon after walking around with it after a certain amount of time, and baby Pokemon can evolve into stronger forms under special circumstances. In fact, there's a lot of new ways Pokemon can evolve in this game. Sometimes certain Pokemon can only evolve on a particular time of day, and some Pokemon won't evolve unless it's happy enough with its trainer. Finally, there's some Pokemon who won't evolve unless you trade it while it's holding on to something, and oh Jesus Christ, really? Do we really need all these circumstantial evolutions?
Well, to be fair, there really was no other way to add evolutions to Pokemon we already had in Gen 1, like evolving Scyther into Caesar or Poliwhirl into Politoed. And a lot of these new evolutions kick ass, so the minor inconvenience seems really, well, minor.
Aside from evolutions at day or night, which may have something going for it, or during specific areas in the region, it's not that bad since it does make some amount of sense. But trade evolutions like in Generation 4, it's just lazy and stupid.
We'll talk about that when I review Gen 4 10 years from now. Anyway, next up is Goldenrod City, where you can find the radio tower and...
Oh no.
Oh god. Not this place.
Oh no. Oh no. Oh no.
What? What's wrong?
The gym leader, Johnny, the gym leader.
Who, Whitney?
Whitney!
She doesn't look too bad, guys.
Whitney's Miltank, it's the spawn of Satan itself.
That Miltank will be the end of you. May Arceus have mercy on your soul.
Okay.
Lucky bastard.
Well, I guess it didn't have its coffee this morning. It just might not be in the mood.
Well, the leader of the next gym in Ecruteak City, Morty, is just as bad. His Gengar is the stuff of nightmares. No pun intended, I swear. He'll constantly use Hypnosis to put your Pokemon to sleep, use Dream Eater to heal itself, it has a shit ton of special attack, and...
How the fuck do you keep doing that?
I love Kadabra. Hey, doesn't Morty's sprite look like Solid Snake? I guess I should point out the bug catching contest that happens on certain days above Goldenrod City. Honestly, I don't find it as appealing as the Safari Zone in Generation 1, because the variety of Pokemon is nothing but bugs. If you manage to catch the best bug, you win the contest. I thought I was a shoo-in for first place with a pincer, but I ended up getting second place. The person who won first place won with a fucking pincer. To the left of Ecruteak City awaits Olivine City, where you can find this giant lighthouse that's powered by a single Pokemon.
Wait, one Pokemon manning a 24-hour shift? That sucks. Must have forgot to join the Poke Union or something.
I mean, hell, when we meet it for the first time, it's sick. They're making it work 24 hours a day, even when it's, not feeling well.
You know, there should really be an activist group that fights against shit like this. Nothing wrong could ever come from that, right?
The gym leader here, Jasmine, won't battle you until you cure the sick Pokemon. Luckily, the cure can be found just south of Olivine City, in Cinnawood City, where you can also face off against the gym leader of this town, Chuck, who specializes in fighting Pokemon. I see what they did there. When you deliver the cure to the sick Pokemon, you can finally face off with Jasmine, who specializes in the new Steel type. She also has what's probably the best gym in the entire game. No trainers, no gimmicks, just you and her. Thanks, Jasmine, but that Pokemon at the lighthouse is still overworked. Bitch. To the right of Ecruteak City lies Mahogany Town, where Team Rocket once again rears its ugly head. Team Rocket plans on forcefully evolving all the Magikarp in the Lake of Rage into Gyarados so they can use them for... evil stuff. I don't know, it's never fully explained why they're doing this. It's also where you can encounter the red Gyarados, and thus introducing yet another new concept into the mainstream Pokemon series, Shiny Pokemon.
Shiny Pokemon are incredibly rare recolors of Pokemon. If you ever happen to run into one, catch it. The alternate color doesn't really do anything, but it looks cool, and it's one of the ultimate bragging rights for a Pokemon enthusiast. They changed how it works in Gen 3, but for Gen 2, the wild Pokemon's IVs, or individual values, have to match up to an incredibly specific set in order for it to be a shiny. You can increase your odds with some overly complex and tedious breeding chains, but the chances of finding a shiny Pokemon normally in the wild are 1 in 8,192.
Hey look, there's one right there!
Well, I have like 9 in my entire career, so they can't be that hard to find. I mean, how many do you have, Ted?
1.
The red Gyarados doesn't count.
It was a shiny Donphan.
Donphan.
Fuck both of you.
After dealing with Team Rocket inside their secret base in Mahogany Town, you can battle the town's gym leader, Price, who uses Ice-type Pokemon, which you can easily destroy with a Fire-type Pokemon. Typhlosion?
Typhlosion.
Typhlosion.
Palava.
Close enough.
But it turns out Team Rocket is not exactly done yet. As soon as you drive them out of Mahogany Town, they immediately hijack the radio tower in Goldenrod City, where you can find out that they're searching for Giovanni, their boss from Generation 1, via a radio signal. That's right, this criminal organization is so out of whack they spend all their time, energy, and resources just to attempt to contact their former boss, who may or may not be listening in. I'm beginning to see why an 11-year-old could beat them last time, and that was with Giovanni.
Anyway, once you defeat them inside the tower, we can get back to gym leader hunting. Next up is Blackthorn, but before we can get there, we have to cross the ice path, which really isn't that harmful of a dungeon, but it has a Pokemon based off of Santa Claus, Delibird. Just thought I'd share that with you.
Blackthorn City really isn't all that much spectacular, but it's here where you can not only score your last gym badge, you can also talk to the move deleter in case you want your Pokemon to forget certain moves like HMs. The final gym leader here is Claire, who uses Dragon-type Pokemon. This can potentially be a long and drawn-out battle if you're not prepared, but overall, you shouldn't have too much of a problem. Alright, we have all 8 badges, time for
Legendary hunting!
Pardon?
Yeah, Johnny, it's time to get some legendary Pokemon, the best ones in the game.
I don't care about those.
But you have to. Come on, it won't take that much time at all.
Alright, fine. Yes, like Generation 1, there's also special one-of-a-kind Pokemon you can catch if you're lucky enough. Generation 2 was the first game to feature the legendaries on the cover of the games, something each subsequent generation will follow with. First, we have Ho-Oh, which... oops.
You killed it!
You idiot!
Sorry. Well, we still have Lugia, which... oh.
Stop doing that!
Are you doing this on purpose?
I can't help it, I'm too strong.
Well, nah, don't even bother.
Huh?
Yeah, it's time to get some roaming legendaries.
Roaming legendaries?
Yes, roaming legendaries. After releasing them from the Burn Tower, Raikou, Suicune, and Entei will start wandering around Johto randomly. They never stay fucking still, and if you want to catch them, you're going to have to invest a lot of time, energy, patience, and Pokeballs. Seriously, it can take forever. Not only do you have to chase these fuckers, but you can't even track them with the Pokedex until you run into them for the first time, which is completely luck-based. Be prepared to spend hours on these assholes.
And holy fuck is he not kidding. Wanna know why this review took longer to release than the others? These assholes. I spent 4 hours looking for these motherfuckers just to have footage of them. And now I'm gonna make them faint.
What?
What is your damage, John?
Feel that earthquake, baby. With all 8 badges in your collection, we can finally head into the Pokemon League at the Indigo Plateau. That's right, all the way back in Kanto. Well, actually, Kanto is just slightly towards the right of your hometown, which really makes me think why it took these guys 3 years to discover 100 new species of Pokemon. I mean, just what exactly was going on during that time? After trekking through Victory Road once more, it's time to face off against the Elite Four yet again, which contains a few new faces this time around. There's Will, who specializes in Psychic types, Koga from Generation 1, who still uses Poison types, Bruno making a return with Fighting types, Karen, who uses the new Dark type, and finally, Lance, who's once again the last challenger you need to beat. Like in Generation 1, you'll need to defeat all 4 without a Pokemon Center rest in between, so stock up on the right items, train your Pokemon to the right levels, and good luck. You know, I can't help but feel that was too easy.
Oh, that's okay, Johnny.
Well, you're only halfway there.
What?
That's right. Upon beating the Elite Four at the Indigo Plateau, you can explore the rest of Kanto from Pokemon Generation 1.
Really? Sweet!
Yeah, after the credits roll and after speaking to Professor Elm, you can ride the SS Aqua and Olivine City to Vermilion City. Not only is Kanto pretty much structured the way it was back in Gen 1, but you can also fight all 8 of the original gym leaders and win their badges as well.
I was really shocked at the Kanto reveal. I mean, I thought the game was over, and then I see all the old places are open again. I was expecting a lot more, surely, Viridian Forest is kind of cut down and everything, but hey, it was nice to walk around with my Pokemon and see the new region again.
Being able to run around in Kanto again is awesome. While it's a bit shorter than Johto overall, it still adds a ton of content to the game. What I really like about Kanto though is how they changed the landscape in the time since Red, Blue, and Yellow. 3 years is a long time, and while some things are familiar, there's enough that's changed to give the region an almost somber feeling. I mean, look at Lavender Town. The Pokemon Tower, where hundreds of dead Pokemon were laid to rest, has been converted to a fucking radio tower. Sure, they moved the bodies to Mr. Fuji's house, but still, respect much. And look at Cinnabar Island. Someone must have let Missing No loose again because the whole place is gone.
John, where are you going?
I want my Raichu, damn it.
But John, you already have an Ampharos.
Yeah, but I want my Raichu.
Alright, I guess.
I also want a Dragonite.
John, that's just gonna take forever, dude.
Ooh, is that a Larvitar? I think I'll raise it into a Tyranitar.
What is wrong with you?
I can't exactly explain it, but every time I enter Kanto and Gold and Silver, I feel like starting with a new team, with some exceptions mind you, but the thought of making a new team with Pokemon from a generation I loved was always a fun time for me. Admittedly, this was another reason why I took so long with this review in the first place. I got a little too caught up in raising a second team. It also didn't help that getting items like a Thunderstone for my Pikachu was a bit tedious, or trying to get a Water Stone to make my Eevee into a Vaporeon. Why can't I just buy Elemental Stones and sell it on City like I did in Generation 1? All of the gym leaders pack the same type of Pokemon they had in Generation 1, only they're much stronger this time around. In terms of any sort of plot, there's not much going on here besides the power plant needing some restoration. It doesn't take very long to resolve, and once you do fix it, you're just spending the rest of your time collecting the Kanto gym badges in any order you want. But when all's said and done and you've collected all the Kanto badges, you can gain access to Mount Silver, the final area of the game. The place itself really isn't all that big, but at the very top of the mountain you can come across, hey, it's me from Generation 1! That's right, the final opponent of Generation 2 is none other than Red himself, packing the highest level Pokemon in the entire game. Seriously, level 81 Pikachu? Christ, someone's paranoid. Needless to say, Red will mop the floor with you if you aren't prepared, but look at it like this. If you got this far, you can make it. Well, it's finally over, guys.
Did you really need to raise a Tyranitar?
Oh, I can't help it, I'm a power-hungry whore.
Overkill doesn't even begin to describe it, John.
Would you two just give your final thoughts already?
I think the game itself is fantastic. It has the most interesting world to explore as it has Johto and Kanto in it. Not to mention it fixes a lot of obvious gameplay problems, and I think it's the best set of Pokemon in the series as it has Gen 1 and Gen 2 Pokemon in it. The game isn't too hard or too easy, and it is insanely fun. If you're interested, I highly recommend trying out the Nintendo DS remakes, which I think are even better.
Gold, Silver, and Crystal are pretty much everything I could ever want out of a sequel. The world is bigger and more immersive, there's tons more to do, they went out of their way to fix all the glitchy little problems that Gen 1 had. It's also just a better structured and written narrative, with characters that have development and themes that are surprisingly dark for a game series that is usually pegged as being kiddie. For an 8-bit game, it also holds up really well, on both aesthetics and gameplay. The music is great, easily my favorite soundtrack in the series, and the game is unquestionably one of the best looking titles on the Game Boy. On the gameplay side, while it is a little bit simple, the mechanics work, and if you're into competitive battling, the GSC metagame is one of the most balanced games in the series. I can't blame you if you just prefer the update that Heart Gold and Soul Silver gave the Johto and Kanto regions, but I do think that the original version still holds up today. Give it a shot if you're interested. That is, of course, if you can find a copy with a working save battery.
And how about that soundtrack? To this day, the music in Pokemon Gold and Silver is without a doubt my favorite soundtrack in the entire series. While there are certain themes I like more in Generation 1, Generation 2's entire soundtrack just kicks ass as a whole.
I personally really liked Violet City's theme, the Kanto Gym Leader remix, as well as the Final Battle remix, of course.
Well, I like the whole soundtrack in general, really.
There's the rival battle theme, the bike theme, Route 38 and 39, Lake of Rage, the surfing theme, Lance and Rick.
Personally, this is where my Pokemon peak had ended. I spent so much time playing this generation, I was quite frankly Pokemon'd out. I'm serious, I completely skipped over Generation 3 when it was first released with the exception of Fire Red and Leaf Green, and I didn't pick the series back up until Pokemon Platinum was released years later. As an RPG, Generation 2 does a great job of getting me into the game's world, its battle mechanics, and raising and training my Pokemon. If there's one thing I could complain about, it's the process of collecting all the Pokemon. Seriously, it can get outright tedious and there's a lot of prerequisites to fulfill in order to fill up the entire Pokédex. But if all you care about is raising and training Pokemon to battle your friends and family, this is the generation for you. Though like Ryan and Ted have stated, I recommend getting the remakes on the Nintendo DS, they're just so much better. Are we done now?
Yeah, just about.
Well, John, what about that other game?
What game? So yeah, after the release of Generation 2, a sequel to Pokemon Stadium was released. It makes sense, with new Pokemon introduced, it's only natural that they would do something like this. Well, firstly, I'd like to thank Will for donating this game to me at the Too Many Games Expo. I seriously didn't expect that, and he's an awesome person for doing so. Thing is, guys, the more I think about it, the more pointless it seems for me to review it. Thanks to Matt, I was finally able to borrow the transfer pack so I can transfer my team from Gold, Silver, or Crystal to the Nintendo 64 so I can get the full experience. But guess what? All of the battery backups on these cartridges are dead. You believe that shit? Now, plenty of you have directed me to tutorials and videos that show the process of replacing the battery, and while I appreciate that, guys, I think I'm going to hold off on that until I have the spare time to do so. I already spent more than enough time on this month and I'm not going to delay things any further. I apologize for disappointing some of you guys, but I really want to be able to use the transfer pack and not rely on rental Pokemon again. But if I could say anything about it, it's pretty much exactly like Stadium 1, only with all the battle mechanics introduced in Generation 2. There's also this kick-ass library where you can study battle mechanics and get a good understanding of how to match up types in battle. Today we have sites on the internet like Cerebi.net and Bulbapedia for Pokemon knowledge, but for an N64 game, this is a pretty nifty feature. Short and to the point, if you liked Stadium 1, you're gonna love Stadium 2. Now are we done?
Come on, John, it was fun, wasn't it?
Well, I had fun, yeah. It's just that reviewing Pokemon games is draining, especially in a month's time.
So what will you do now?
I don't know. Not sure yet. I should probably get to Arkham City now.
How about a month of Kirby then?
Please, like that series is worth dedicating an entire month to.
What did you say?
I'm not doing a month of Kirby. Doesn't deserve one.
Oh boy, here we go.
Oh, shit.
No one. This is Kirby. John, I challenge you to a Pokemon battle.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Oh, would you two just battle already?
Fine. Ted, get ready to be schooled. I hope you guys enjoyed Month of Pokemon. I hope you guys stay tuned for more reviews. Batman Arkham City is coming up next. In the meantime,
Bring it on, bitch.
oh, it'll be my pleasure, Loki. Let's go.